This is the Decarbonization Disruptors Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Cohen. This is episode 14 of our podcast, and I'm very pleased to welcome Stephen Prince, CEO and President of Vutility. Stephen, a veteran energy transition executive, leads Vutility's mission to deliver visibility to data that helps businesses optimize their energy consumption while improving operational efficiencies and creating a more sustainable future. Stephen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matt. It's a real pleasure, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. I was excited to have you and really talk not just about Vutility, but kind of your career. And what I'm really excited to talk about to start is, you've had a really extensive career in electrical distribution, grid solutions. You've been at large companies, small companies, utilities. And as a recruiter, we're seeing a lot more businesses looking for kind of the next generation of talent, people coming into the industry. So given your background, I'm curious kind of what advice you would give or you're giving to that next generation of leadership in the grid space, and even what areas of the greater industry should people focus their careers when they're thinking about, coming into this space?
Well, what a great question, and what an exciting time if you're a young fresh grad or even a high school graduate and you're looking to find a career path and with lots of opportunity and the ability to provide for you, your family. There's never been a better time to be coming into this space. I've been doing it for over 35 years, and I would love to be starting all over again. The good news is it's robust and ever increasingly growing. And it's not just because of Cleantech and ESG and that movement. The initiatives underway cannot stop, as the economics of this technology and what needs to be done are driving the requirement to make these changes, to take on these initiatives. So we have a really kind of polar situation politically, but if you look at it technically and economically, there's no turning back. We have to have a bidirectional grid. It has to be digitized. There has to be flexible supply. All of these things bring really fantastic results from a climate perspective. But what's even more important is they're driven by real economics, and they can stand on the economics alone. So anybody who's feeling like getting into this space is fraught with risk, political risk. I think it's a misunderstanding, and that's probably just a lot of noise in the political environment. The other thing that I love about it is it provides career paths for college grads, very academic individuals, as well as kids that get out of high school and say, hey, I don't want to go to college. I don't want to do those things. I just want to work in the trades. And they're less inclined to pursue academic efforts and endeavors, because there's such a short supply of some of these very basic trades, plumbing, electricians for integration. All of this is in very, very high demand, and many of those paths cannot be outsourced. They're very local in nature, and there's very, very high demand. And as a result of the demand versus supply, they pay very, very well. And let me give you an example, and this has been a theme of mine for about 15 years. Since I ran a company in Berlin, Germany, we're paying master electricians in excess of $150,000 base pay before bonuses and other benefits. And if you were to tell somebody even 4 or 5 years ago that as a master electrician, they could be well into the six figures in compensation, they probably would have just looked at you and said, huh? But in reality, that's what's going on, and we can't find enough of them. So the good news is this is a fantastic opportunity for all those getting into the space, and it's sustainable. It's not going away. You can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's so funny. I have a son. He's going to be 3 in January, and he has some time before he obviously picks a career. But when I grew up, it was all about going to college. That was it. And as a recruiter and just someone in the space, like you're saying, if he grows up and he says, I want to be a plumber, I want to be an electrician, I want to be in this trade, I'd be like, great. That's a great career path. But even 15, 20 years ago, parents weren't saying that. And so I think that switch is only going to, give a lot more opportunities to people. And what I'm curious about is, in your career, one of the things I noticed is you've been a leader in both large business units and even whole organizations. And you've kind of been more of a transformational leader in a lot of these organizations. So I'm curious kind of your process when you go into a new leadership role of that magnitude. What's been your process to understand what businesses need, and then going forward from that, how do you inspire others to make the necessary changes to make the business as profitable as possible?
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking the question, and you highlighted a couple nuances that are really important. Um, I want to clarify that I'm not the type of individual that creates a startup and drives it from concept to a burgeoning enterprise. I discovered probably 30 years ago what I'm really good at is fixing problems, and in particular driving commercial adoption when others have tried and failed to make the progress the shareholders or the owners are expecting. So with that orientation, I tend to come in when the capital is tired and the investor owners are seeking rapid and efficient change. And so it's something that has to happen with some pace. It has to be capital efficient. But because of the nature of showing up when you have an enterprise that's got some longevity to it, it has a history, it has many employees that very much have a vested interest in the outcomes and have probably made a lot of sacrifices. You have to move with pace, but you have to be hypersensitive to the individuals and the organization itself. So I have a very straightforward, it's going to sound very simple, but there's complexities in the way it gets executed. And so there's like 3 or 4 things that I look at, and it typically takes me about 45 to 60 days. I would bet every time I come in, regardless of the organization size and the magnitude of the profit and loss statement, the investor owners want an answer like in 30 days, and they want you executing. Because like I said, the organizations tend to be a little distressed from too much capital invested, not enough progress. One of the first things I do is, and I try to do it calmly but thoughtfully, and really seek to understand, and I determine the skill and will of the individuals within the organization, probably with a hyper focus on leadership, but also on key individuals within the team. And I'm not just looking at them individually, obviously for their skills and their desire, will, and drive, but I also watch how they work as a team or they don't work as a team and how they align. And it's really helpful to see them in stressful situations because people tend to behave differently depending on their stress level. And then the other thing that I do very deliberately is I evaluate the offering of the enterprise, and I look at the target markets for size and maturity, and then test for minimal viable product, their awareness and the availability of that. And if it isn't there, I assess how they're collecting the information from customers, prospects, and other market-facing resources, basically to get a handle on their solution vision and fit. And then how do they adapt to changes or notifications, receiving data that says, hey, we're not quite there, and what do we need to do to get there? Typically that process is broken or I'm not being asked to come in. The other thing I do is I look at the technology or the processes being leveraged to create solutions or hardware, software, the combination thereof, to the customers, and I look for disruption and differentiation, and whether they have some intellectual property or trade secrets, and make sure that they kind of line up with my prior point. And if they don't, then I'm rapidly thinking about how we can make changes to create that kind of opportunity. And then depending on the maturity of the business, I evaluate the business processes and the culture for scalability. Are they documented? Does the organization understand them? Is there a need to create them? Are they scalable? So I get through all of those subjects in that basic methodology within 45 to 60 days, and then I create a plan to move forward and turn around the organization. The good news is I've done it 5 times. This is the 5th time. One time I failed. The first time I failed, I learned a lot from that. We don't need to get into all those things, but I most certainly adapted my approach both in the evaluation and then the post-evaluation execution, and it's gone really well since.
And I'd love to talk about how it's going currently at Vutility. And then I know that a lot of great things are happening there. And specifically want to learn more about, how you're leveraging, the 3-phase monitoring approach that you have, as well as, submetering solutions to achieve the kind of sustainability goals that you're searching for your customers.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you letting me make a plug for Vutility. I've been here 2 years, and since I arrived, we've grown revenue by 10x over the last 2 years. And the good news is when I got here, I could see that there were 21 patents in place. And I saw a device that was highly differentiated and had some really unique attributes that solved a problem that I had tried to solve when I was president of Centrica Business Solutions for North America. So I was very familiar with the customer base, the target market, but I was unaware of a solution like Vutility had. They never came on my radar. But what made the product unique from a technical standpoint, and what these patents surround, is it's a device that communicates using LoRaWAN protocols, which is basically, most people think about wireless communication as Wi-Fi or cellular, but LoRaWAN is what the military uses to control drones. And so LoRaWAN can penetrate concrete walls, it can penetrate steel, it can transmit over very large distances. And so the holy grail of energy efficiency and submetering is commercial industrial customers, and in particular, industrial processes that cannot be disrupted because they're running 24/7. So what you want to be able to do is measure and do submetering in an environment without shutting down the power, but having highly accurate, self-powered, non-maintenance driven devices. And if you can solve that problem, then you open up an entire market that's been underserved and been unavailable. And the good news is we've learned, not just Vutility, this is a very crowded space. There's a lot of submetering companies using Wi-Fi, using cellular communications, any number of different measurement types in nature: water, gas, electricity, vibration, humidity, temperature. There's any number of these devices. But what Vutility has that's quite unique is we can install 400 devices in a hospital campus, never shut down the power, and have a digital twin of an entire hospital campus up and running in 4 hours. And that was never available. So one of our customers is HCA. They've digitized an entire campus in less than 4 hours, and they did that with our technology. That was a customer that the existing submetering providers would have never been able to gain because of the nature of the tech they use and how they do it. So that's what makes this really exciting, and that's what's making this a very quick turnaround.
And I'd be curious to know, kind of get your perspective, given your background and what you're doing now, kind of about the impact of modernizing metering at that point of the metering solution for overall decarbonization efforts. It's an area that you've said is a very crowded space. There's a lot of legacy companies still in that world. So what is the impact of making changes at the metering level, and how can it be utilized even further for the sustainability goals that your customers are looking for?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. First of all, the reason why it's so crowded is because the addressable market is just absolutely massive. 96% of the buildings in the United States are not submetered. They get a single bill at the main meter at the head end of the system, and they really don't have visibility to anything behind the meter. So when you get a basic utility bill and it arrives 6 weeks after you've incurred the expenses it's very difficult to make change. So you can't change what you don't measure and what you can't see. And so submetering becomes really important if you're trying to optimize energy usage or improve processes. It's not just about saving money on your utility bill. It's about how do you behave differently based upon the signals that you get. I'll give you an example. Costco has learned that if they measure the amount of water they use within their stores, that it's actually, there's a direct correlation to the efficiency of how the warehouses are operated. What a crazy concept. You don't learn that in B school, right? But they've discovered that, and there's probably nobody better at wholesale than Costco in the United States today. So while we're not providing water metering to Costco, I think it's a really safe and great example of why submetering matters. The other thing that studies have found is that if you submeter something that it otherwise is not, you save approximately 35% of the usage in general by doing that. And so there's huge economic benefits from doing this. The cherry on top is the ESG decarbonization part, but the reality is the business cases for our technology and others' technology in this space are extremely strong. At Chevron, when we put in our meters, they get a payback within 2 hours in a refinery. Within 2 hours, it pays for the entire install. What used to take them 6 to 8 months of engineering and mechanical work, we did in less than an hour, and they paid for the entire implementation in the first 2 hours. So, and people say, well, how can that be? Why isn't everybody doing that? And the answer is because up to now, you don't turn off a refinery other than planned maintenance. It runs 24/7 because that's the way the economics work in that industrial process. And I can give you a handful of examples that are no different than that. So modernizing metering, integrating metering has huge implications to how companies operate and how they improve their profitability, and they can actually generate revenues with the visibility they gain.
And I also wanted to get your take on something that you said earlier, which is, how important it is for us to have a bidirectional grid and really modernizing our grid infrastructure, especially in the United States, with the sort of the introduction of the EVs as a big part of our grid solution. What can we do to push grid modernization to the forefront of the decarbonization discussion? Because I feel like it's not talked about enough. I think what happens is maybe you agree with this, we have a lot of solutions we're looking to implement, but no one's discussing the fact that there's not enough power or not enough infrastructure to support it. So what can we do to really push that grid modernization discussion so that it's talked about more?
I think the biggest problem is this subject matter has gotten entangled in the political conversation. And we have I think everybody can agree, we have a very awkward political environment in the United States, not just in the United States, in a lot of countries, most certainly in Western countries where you have democracies or setups that are similar to that. And so what happens is people get entangled in the dialogue around climate warming, global warming, climate change, and these kind of things. And while those are very serious topics and one that deserve debate, the truth of the matter is what's happening on the grid and what we're doing on the grid makes total economic sense, irrespective of the global warming climate argumentation and the embattled positions from a political perspective. And the technical people and the utility people understood this over a decade and a half ago. I used to work for Edison International, Southern California at Edison. At the time, we were the second largest electric utility in the country, and we were working on these issues way back in the mid-90s. And most certainly, we had a vision of how things could change. I don't think we would have ever guessed that battery energy storage or EVs and photovoltaics and wind would be so dominant. And most certainly nobody realized that they would become cheaper, less expensive from a generation standpoint than fossil fuel plants. Pretty much everything but nuclear. And then nuclear comes with a whole host of other issues that people grapple with. So the interesting thing is, if we could just get to the economics and the discussions, and unfortunately those topics and that education process gets clouded by the political banter. But the truth of the matter is, this stuff makes total economic sense. And the example I love to give, I go to China a lot. We have a really, really fantastic supplier in China, and they get a lot of attention because they're the most dominant player in EVs. But we have been working with them for over 8 years, and they've been a fantastic partner. But what the Chinese government has figured out is that Cleantech is just good business. And they've really leaned in on Cleantech because it makes good economic sense, provides jobs, and allows them to dominate the supply chain in many, many dimensions. It's not just EVs. I mean, it's around batteries, around storage, around wind, anything that has a large market opportunity. They've leaned in and invested in, and they've benefited from it. I've been crowing about this for over a decade. I did it in Germany. I did it in the UK. I've done it in the United States. Grid modernization, the equipment associated with it, and the jobs that it creates is what would drive an incredibly productive economy for the United States. And the good news is we're starting to do it, and we're starting to really lean in. And so I have a very optimistic view of it. And I think the public, as they see the outcomes, are going to say, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. Going off of that, is it really, I think sometimes, is it come down to messaging? I mean, honestly, I mean, is it more about we just need to stop talking about saving the planet and start talking about saving our wallets? Does it really come down to that in the end of the day?
It does. And to be honest with you, when I took this job, the company was talking all about ESG and climate change. And I said, guys, stop. Okay, that does resonate with some corporations. But what's going on, and I think we all can relate to this as well, it's hard to make money in business. It just is. Unless you have a monopoly or you have unless you're a FANG company, it's very, very hard to make money. But the good news is this is a way to make money. And so the way we sell Vutility, we talk about the ESG and the decarbonization, but that is the last thing we talk about. That's the cherry on top. We're always driving ROI, and that's how you accelerate adoption. And you get out of that banter. And I think you're right. What you said is absolutely right.
Well, look, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you providing your insight. I think our audience are getting really excited about the things that you've said. In closing, anything you want to add about what's going on now at Vutility or even coming up that our audience should know and get excited about?
Yeah, I just give a little bit of advice to everybody and anybody when it comes to being a venture-backed company. You know, the environment changes, the economic environment changes in investment banking. I used to be an investment banker, and we're in an environment where capital is really hard. There's a lot on the sidelines, and a lot of people focus on that, but getting the capital and being able to put it to work, the rules have very much changed. Okay, so private equity, venture capital is looking for more mature companies, more mature models. They don't want to take any extreme technology risk or even technology or commercial risk. They're really looking for enterprises that are mature and have already kind of crossed the chasm, and they're at least at early adoption, if not further along. So my advice to anybody that's running a venture-backed company is really strive to get to that, cross the chasm, and get to that early adopter stage or post-early adopter stage. Get to profitability as soon as possible, even if you're sacrificing gross growth, because that's the way you're going to get funded and that's the way you're going to succeed. And a lot of people have not made that change. They haven't made that adaptation, and they're going to find themselves in really, really rough waters if they don't do it quickly.
Well, no, it's great insight. And again, I really appreciate taking time to speak with me. I know, like I said, our audience will be excited about the insight that you've gave. So again, Stephen, thanks for taking the time to do this. This is the Decarbonization Disruptors Podcast, and we will see you next time.